Hi, everyone, and welcome to Unleash with me, Scarlett Johnson, presented by Moms for Liberty. And we have a special guest today, Beth Bourne. And I'm really excited to talk to her because she has been on the front lines of the war on women in California, women and girls. And I really want to hear her perspective, her firsthand perspective. But before I bring her on, I'm going to play this video. And most of the footage that you see in this video has been captured by Beth Bourne, this mom who has made it a crusade to defend women and girls and their privacy and their sports, and to just stand in the gap for so many families fighting radical gender ideology. As she lives in California. She's in the belly of the beast, so she can tell us so much about where this all started, where it is right now, and where it's going if we don't continue to fight back. So let's just get this video going so that we can talk to Beth as soon as possible.
Not just won all three events he competed in, he completely dominated. And the point is, nobody's happy. I guess I'm sticking on the sports theme as we go to my second and final topic. And this is about a young man who likes to call himself a girl named A.B. Hernandez out in the great state of California. And he has been in the news a lot because he happens to be a pretty good athlete when he competes against girls. I'd love to see how he would do competing against boys because he is a biological man. The interesting thing is that, of course, he's in Gavin Newsom's California, and Gavin continues to not take a stand on protecting women and women's sports. But he shared the top step, the first place spot there on the podium at a track meet recently, because he not just won all three events he competed in, he completely dominated, which, big shock because he's in the long jump, triple jump, high jump, won the long jump over the second place competitor by over a foot. That's usually what happens with men because men are faster, stronger, can jump higher, further, etc. The controversy, that's bad enough that we're continuing this, despite all the efforts of the Trump administration, federally and trying to influence states as well. And the NCAA, but of course this is high school. But the fact that his mother then went on a rant on social media about the fact that her son was forced to share a podium with a female athlete. She's mad because she's saying these people just can't look me in the eye and can't allow my daughter to be celebrated because she won the competition. California is being weak in my perspective and taking a middle ground here and saying, well, you know what, we're just going to put a girl and A.B. Hernandez on the podium so everybody's happy. And the point is, nobody's happy. A.B.'s mom is now complaining. Of course, the girls who are still standing there, which a lot of people crush the young women for competing in the first place. I don't, because the adults in the room are choosing to not be adults and protect. And these girls have worked their whole lives. I understand why they keep competing. But the mom of A.B. is complaining. And of course, parents of these young girls are complaining as well. I'm disgusted at the mother. I'm disgusted that she continues to allow her son to do this. I don't know if I'm the only one in this friends group chat who feels that way, because it's nothing personal against AB. It is just wrong to have biological boys competing against biological girls.
Well, there's just some interesting things about all this, this particular story, in that the mom's behavior has subtle echoes of Munchausen's by proxy, right? This is when you let kids separate from you and compete and lose and win, and it's not about you, the parent. In fact, healthy parenting is about letting go several years before the age of these particular kids in question. So isn't that interesting how the mom is so personally affected by all this? That's interesting. The other kind of interesting thing is that it's considered terrible for the transgender child not to transition before puberty. But it is after puberty for the male to female transitions that they get these performance enhancing effects. I don't know. Are we celebrating the fact that this child transitioned after puberty? It's just there's so many weird wrinkles in these whole things that end up, with us with so many questions. It should have been just left alone as it was. That's fine. I would like to also know, are there any cases of post-pubertal transitioning male to female who don't outperform all the females in
Yes.
the
Oh no, who don't outperform male to female. The Olympics did one, or the IOC did one, but there were a lot of flaws in the methodology. I'm going to try to remember this, but the long story short,
post-pubertal transition who doesn't outperform all the
it
females.
may have been, but the problem with the one study is that they let them know what it was about. So if you're like, oh, we're checking to see if this is fair, and you're a trans female athlete, it's like, oh, I can barely perform. I remember there were tons of flaws. There was one, and I had to cite it and be responsible because I knew it was going to come up in a conversation, but it was deeply flawed exactly for that one reason. And there were other co-founding factors. But I can tell you this much. Pre-puberty, there are numerous studies out of Greece, out of Australia. We've got 6-year-old boys running faster, jumping higher, doing more push-ups. 9-year-old boys, same thing, greater endurance. Then you've got transgender females, so boys to girls, competing in grip strength against girls to boys. Sorry, this gets really confusing. And the long story short is that even on puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones, those transgender females outperform transgender males, women on puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones in almost every category of fitness, in particular strength. They looked at thigh muscle, they looked at grip strength. Like, there are numerous studies on this. It's simply not fair. So you have to take the 3 pillars, which would be inclusion, fairness, and safety, apply which one means the most to you in a descending order, and then take a utilitarian approach. Sure, I care about inclusion, but do I care about it more than safety and fairness? Not really. If everybody's going to get hurt and the trans child can't play, that sucks. But it also sucks for the biological females. So again, I go back to this theme of what's the utilitarian approach? How do we create less suffering? I don't know. This is ridiculous to me personally. The data's there. Why are we fighting about this?
Yeah, I'll just say quickly on this one, that's the key part. The fact that this stuff is still happening at this point is so ridiculous. We can look at every study we want, and we can all pull up all the numbers and everything else. We all know this is wrong. Everyone knows it. It has nothing to do with not, say, potentially respecting an adult who lives a certain way. As I always say, if they'll show me respect, I'll show them respect. But when it comes to kids, and then Sage, you made a really good point that I think is worth reiterating, that there's suddenly this thing where the girls just shouldn't compete then. And it's like, why? Well, no, the failure is on the failure of the adults and the system who put these young girls in the position of having to then, okay, so I won't run track, I won't wrestle, I won't play basketball or whatever it is that I love. I, as the 15-year-old girl, will not do that. I'm going to make the ultimate sacrifice and not play the game that I love because you guys, you adults failed and the institutions failed and everything else. No. So that becomes an incredibly difficult, complex problem, because then you're saying, okay, if I had a 15-year-old daughter and I knew she was about to get into a wrestling ring with a 15-year-old boy, I don't know that I'd be thrilled. Well, I know I wouldn't be thrilled about it, but would I want to be telling her, just don't do what you love? So they have so rotted so many things. And if you can't just leave kids alone to do what they love, particularly with athletics, which nobody cares about gender or anything else. I'm playing a ton of basketball these days. And in one of the games that I play in, there's a girl that plays. It's usually about 18 guys that rotating crew. And we have this one girl, Alexa, and she's she's pretty good. Like she had a couple threes in my face the other day. She's pretty good. But try to think about it. Try to think about it the other way. Imagine if there was a group of girls that every Tuesday night they played, and I just started showing up. And
Yeah.
I'm gonna be 50 next month. I'm not even making this about skill. But if there was just a girl game and a guy just started showing up, the girls would be pissed, and rightfully so.
So that was an interesting conversation, a good prelude. Let's bring on Beth. Hey, Beth, how are you doing?
I'm doing really well. Thank you. It's great to be here.
That's good. I'm so glad to have you. And that was Dave Rubin. And there's a show he does, Sage Steele's there, Dr. Drew. And they do a YouTube show that I listen to a lot. I like the conversational form. And I thought interesting, they used a lot of the video that you take. So let's just dive in. There's some things I disagreed with the framing. I like to just think these are boys. I don't like to, it is confusing. The trans girls, trans boys, like it just gets boys pretending to be girls. It's just boys, biological boys. In everything else is confusing. And when you try to have these conversations, it can be confusing if you don't just stand for the truth and just use the words. And so that's how I'm going to talk. And so far, we don't get kicked off of X anymore for saying that. There was a time where
It
you
was.
did. You did. You got
Mhm.
your account was gone if you use that kind of language. But Beth, thanks for joining. And let's give us a background. Who are you? You live in California, you're a mom. Why did you start to become an activist? What propelled you? And what are you doing right now? The important work that you're doing, and why are you doing it?
So I live in Davis, California, and between Sacramento and San Francisco. And I'm one of the parents who this really impacted me personally. My daughter took on a transgender identity along with many of her friends at the start of junior high school. And I was fortunate; she wasn't medicalized, and she outgrew her trans identity. So I started doing a lot of research on how it came into the schools, the surveys, the library books, the curriculum.
What year
And
was
then,
that?
so that was 2018. So she's like the first cohort where it really was put into, the health class, the science class, flags in the classroom, and then the GSA clubs, the Gender Sexuality Alliance clubs. They would bring in, girls or boys that are quirky and creative, often very gifted, to have free pizza and do arts and craft projects. And, they would be talking to these teachers and school counselors who had just been sort of indoctrinated themselves by the California Teachers Association. So it was sort of like this whole, brainwashing of the public schools here in California. And you, as a parent, you weren't notified of this. You didn't realize that there were these huge changes in how, they were bringing in all gender bathrooms and locker rooms. And then these gender support plans that teachers were allowing kids to secretly socially transition at school with new names, using pronouns. Sometimes a teacher would ask on the first day of school, do you have a name you'd like to use in the classroom? And should we, who else should know about it? That kind of thing.
This
And
is really
I-
interesting that you say 2018, because this came on my radar 2021. So 2022, James Lindsay is the first person to tell me about gender ideology. I had not even heard of that term
Right.
before. So I was in Wisconsin, sitting in a small town in Green Bay, Wisconsin, having lunch with James Lindsay, who was coming in to talk about critical race theory.
Mhm.
And I asked him, so what's next? What's on the horizon? He said, honestly, critical race theory is kind of old news. They are deep into gender ideology.
Mhm.
And when he started to tell me about it, I was like in disbelief. I'm like, oh, that can never happen in Wisconsin. That's crazy. I've never heard of anything like that. And wouldn't you know it was, I literally think 2 months later, I had my first call, a parent that had the evidence and was showing me the curriculum that was being introduced into K through 12 education
Mhm.
in a suburban area of Wisconsin, an area that was once pretty conservative. And I was like, oh my goodness. And once you peel back the layers, it was all there. So your daughter, how old was she when you first recognized this?
She was about 13. And I'll just mention we are in a university town. And so I always let parents know, even if you're in a red state, if you're in a blue city or in a town that has a university, it comes sort of through academia and through medicine, through the libraries and then through the public schools. So altogether, if you're in a place like, Davis, California, kids will be immersed in it, and so will the adults.
That's a really good point
Yeah.
because we're dealing with this issue in New Richmond, Wisconsin. I think they went 65% for Trump. It's a rural farming community fighting boys in the girls' bathrooms. And the residents were absolutely shocked and appalled that it was happening, but they live on the border of Minnesota, on the border of University of Minnesota, and then River Falls, the University of Wisconsin River Falls. So they are a community that is surrounded by
Yeah.
college community, and
Yeah.
it gets infected. Like these ideas, a lot of the administrators, they either have spouses that work
Yeah.
at the college or they once worked at the college. You've got that's very connected. And what you said about libraries as well, like big library systems and all of that.
Yeah, so that was 2017, 2018. And so I became really aware of it. And then I started to say, well, look, parents aren't that concerned about it because they don't think it'll happen to their child, right? Because, the gender medicine, we have these doctors that are promoting these hormones and blockers and surgeries, here in Davis, but they don't think it's going to impact their child. So I decided to do a lot of focus on the sports issue. And I found that the sports issue, while I think that the idea that we're sterilizing kids and harming their bodies is just incredible, horrific event that's happening right now. The sports thing affects almost every family, right? Everyone has a daughter or a niece or a granddaughter. Everyone or most people have played sports in their lives. And so it's much easier for people to understand how insane this is, right? To say that sports can be played with gender identities and not sex bodies. And then also the impact that has on, the girl athletes. So I started focusing on sports in 2023. And I think our first event was at the public library where we wanted to talk about a male athlete. Sophia Loray was going to talk about, I think it was, Will Thomas, Leah Thomas, and the librarian shut down our event because he said we were misgendering. So anyway, so it became a free speech issue too. And Alliance Defending Freedom represented us and Moms for Liberty, and we ended up winning the case. But yet, so that I kind of go back to 2023 when I really started focusing on the sports issue. And I think I've become kind of an expert on the California Interscholastic Federation, how they brought it in and how it's impacted girls across the state.
There's a couple things there. First of all, what needs to be understood, if anyone listening doesn't know this, that when biological boys are allowed to play and compete on all female athletic teams, it is because the school has a policy or the state, the governing body that of every state, there's a governing body that governs all of the high school athletics, the college athletics. They have a policy that allows individuals to participate in that team sport, usually before all this, based on whether they're male or female, the sex meant male, female. But when they allow the definition of sex to be corrupted and to include gender identity, a self-identification, oftentimes it is just the declaration by a student that they identify as a sex that is opposite of their birth, that alone can be enough to allow this male to participate and to compete and practice and use the locker rooms and shower rooms and bathrooms of the girls. And I know that sometimes they'll say, well, they have to show medical records or something like that. It doesn't matter to me either way, because you can't. There is nothing in the world that can transform a boy into a girl, no matter what they do. But even then, they often don't ask for the records. They don't provide proof, and there's no evidence whatsoever that taking estrogen reduces the biological advantage that these boys have over the girls. And they're even showing now that even boys that don't go through puberty, if they block the puberty, they still are born with these inherent biological advantages that makes it unfair. Even if you were to say, like, this is about fairness, I think it's also about truth, which means we can't pretend that boys can be girls no matter what. You should never twist reality in order to accommodate someone's issues with mental health or their beliefs. There's reality and then there's fantasy, and we need to know the difference. So I just wanted to start off by saying that. But this free speech issue is interesting because I think, were it not for President Trump being elected in 2024, Elon Musk taking over X, sort of a change in the enforcement of free speech, I think there'd be, I'm not sure you'd be able to do what you're doing right now. When you think back to what was happening in 2023, I'm glad Moms for Liberty and Alliance Defending Freedom could help you in free speech. I also have been sued several times, but this is all such a large issue. This is about protecting girls' sports, but compelled speech is a big part of it, isn't it? How are kids forced and compelled to say things that aren't true, or teachers or parents?
Yeah, I mean, that's when I oftentimes say that the reason why sports are also so dangerous is because when you tell a boy, oh, you can compete in the girls' sports, and that also means you can use the girls' locker room and the girls' bathroom, and we're going to celebrate, your accomplishments, and they really train these girls to make sure you, that you're kind and you're inclusive and you celebrate the athlete, and all these things, and so it's really asking children to not be honest with what they're seeing with their eyes. So everyone in that classroom, everyone on the, sports field, everyone in that track stadium has to pretend, in this case, let's say A.B. Hernandez, they have to pretend that he's like this special third sex or some, like this other kind of human besides, a male and a female. There's a transgender person. And so you're basically asking every child there to lie about what they're seeing with their eyes, and not to be able to talk about it and not be able to ask questions. So, I saw it with my own child when he was maybe he's 5, 6 years old. There was 2 transgender kids. This is 2010 at his elementary school in Davis. And you could see how uncomfortable he was having to pretend that, this girl in his kindergarten class was actually a boy. So it's just really destabilizing. And I think, then it starts to break down what kids feel like they can say to their parents about what's happening in school, second guessing their own feelings when they hear about, Jazz Jennings being a boy who became a girl. Like, they can't even express their feelings. And it's breaking kids away from their own reality, and then breaking apart the family unit because you can't really talk about it anymore. So it's all so dangerous. It's just,
so when your daughter was 13, and that seems to be a very typical age, between 11, 13 years old, middle school, GSA clubs, now they're being introduced even younger, but it used to begin sort of in the middle school. What was this a surprise was this kind of surprising to you? You know, you knew you were in kind of a liberal or progressive
Right.
area. What was your reaction at first, and what was the reaction of other parents?
So I remember 7 years earlier when, mom in her kindergarten class announced that one of her sons, she had three boys, one was a transgender child. That was 2010. And I remember looking at all these other liberal moms, which I was liberal at the time, and thinking, how does this mother know that her son is a girl? He's 2 years old and he's likes wearing dresses, but they all went along with it. They all said, oh, this is so wonderful. The mom's supportive, that the siblings, the two brothers are supportive. And, now he enjoys wearing these little like pink kind of ballet dresses. And that was my first time where I got this uncomfortable feeling in my stomach because it didn't make sense to me. And I just kind of let it go. I didn't push on it. And I should have, but I think you just want to kind of agree with all your friends. And that's the danger of it, right? If you're in a very liberal area and your mother, you're like, oh, okay, well, if that's what we all think. Yeah, so 5 years later, when my daughter said, or I guess it'd be 6 years later, that she was transgender, I was like shocked, I just disbelief. And then that's when I was lucky that an article had just come out in the Atlantic by Jesse Singal about parents who were pushing back on this in the East Coast and not medicalizing their 16-year-old daughters, and their daughters were growing out of it. So that was just enough for me to be like, wait, there's this article in the Atlantic talking about maybe this isn't true. And I did just enough research that I was able to not so I have an ex-husband, but he was affirming, but we agreed not to medicalize her until she was 18. And I'm just so thankful that I had that gut feeling that this can't be true. And my daughter's really intelligent and gifted, and so she had done all this research on Planned Parenthood and WPATH and all these organizations and citations, but I just had this feeling none of this is based in any real science or medicine. So
And it isn't, and it
Yeah.
isn't, and it's coming more and more to bear.
Yeah.
But there are a lot of parents that maybe didn't do their research, and then Abigail Schreier talks about this. Moms for Liberty. We've talked about this a great deal. We've had book clubs. We've talked with a lot of the experts, but it became kind of a social contagion among girls, where identifying as transgender was almost exclusively in the DSM-5, something that happened to boys of a certain age, and it was almost exclusively boys, and that the advice was that you just usually by 80-90%, by the time they were 19, 20, they would basically grow out of this, and they'd be same sex attracted. That was pretty much the standard. That's the way these things were handled in the psychiatric community, the medical community. And then this change where suddenly it's a lot of young girls, identifying as males, but it's a very different experience where now what we see, these boys like AB Hernandez, like BPJ, when they now come out and they're as a female, they aren't shy or reclusive or sort of hiding. They are like almost starstruck. They are in the spotlight. They're in the media. They are participating in multiple sports. Like AB Hernandez, it isn't just track and field where he is competing with girls, and they seem to be enjoying the attention. And even there's cases in Wisconsin, Maine, in Virginia, a lot of other states where these boys will hang out in the girls' locker room and watch girls undress,
Right.
and nothing's done because they identify the gender identity. So, I mean, is that something that you've seen as you cover sports, that this is predominantly a male a male phenomenon, that male identifying as female and then kind of crushing the girls on the athletic field?
So, so in the sports issue, like I'll just say for my daughter's, group, it was, half of her theater group and a third of her choir group all started identifying
Wow,
as trans at the same
that's
time.
a
And,
lot.
yeah, I know it is. I'm like, wow, that's kind of interesting that half of the girls who are in, this theater group of 20 kids are now identifying as trans or non-binary and but they're very bright, quirky kids. But for the boys, they oftentimes come at it either through like gaming or anime, sometimes even porn, or they get groomed online, on these Discord chats where they're gaming and they're, being influenced by an adult. So they come at it different ways they get there. But, for my daughter, she was a fantastic athlete. She had close to the school record in 8th grade for triple jump and shot put. But when I, said, okay, you're going into 9th grade and you want to compete in sports, and I really encouraged her to, even if you're trans, you can compete in the girls' sports. It's okay. You're going to still be accepted. And she's like, no, I want to compete with the boys. So I looked at the, I knew what her distance was for triple jump. It was like 30 feet or something. And when I looked on where she would place in the JV, junior varsity, or the freshman group, it was almost at the very bottom, right? And the same for shot put. It's a heavier shot put for boys, but I was like, you could still be. So she's going from setting the record at her junior high school to being at the very bottom of if she was in the boys division. And so what did she do? She dropped out of sports, right? So the girls, and I see it across Davis, right? These very tomboyish girls, great athletes, come out as trans and they drop out of sports. In the boys situation at Davis High School around the same time, there were 3 boys who were competing in girls sports. So we actually had one boy who won the state championship for downhill skiing in the girls category. He won the state championship and they actually hid it. So it wasn't printed in the school newspaper. It wasn't printed in our local paper. But, the Daily Mail picked it up. Fox News picked it up. So internationally, nationally, the story was told. But in our town, it stayed very quiet. And I actually didn't know until I spoke to a coach on the golf range. I asked him, I said, are there other boys who are competing in girls sports? And then I found out there were 2 other boys. One boy had just broken the girls record in the pole vault. He jumped 10 feet at Davis High School and broke the 9th grade record. And then there was another boy who was told not to compete on the girls varsity cross country team because they didn't want to give a spot to this, this boy who was calling himself a trans girl. So they had him compete in JV. And if you look at the results from that year, he was winning like every big invitational race at the JV level because, the coach didn't want to put him on varsity, but he's a boy and he's just dominating. But, if I said anything to my liberal friends, they would be like, well, it's, it's only high school sports. It's not that many kids, what about their feelings? And I just realized like people have lost their minds, right? Like we have all these, all of a sudden, all these trans kids coming out and then just completely erasing, the whole idea of Title IX, right? To give fairness and opportunity to girls. So, some of the first research I did actually was going back and looking at when the California Interscholastic Federation adopted these policies. And this is very hard to find, but it was in 2011. It was AB Assembly Bill 266. It says it's a bill that would allow students to participate in the gender in which they identify. And they actually, here in this, it's like a staff report that they, of the proposal, it said that this process would allow individual schools or school districts to access a statewide review panel that would consist of a physician with experience in gender identity and the WPATH, World Professional Association of Transgender Health standards, a psychiatrist at the school, or a licensed mental health care professional, a school administrator, a CIF staff member, and then an advocate familiar with gender identity, and that they would have this panel decide if the students, so this panel would ensure that students not in transition could not attempt to use this issue as an avenue to participate in sports. So when they first brought this idea, it was like, we were going to have this panel of experts who's going to, sit and meet with the athlete, talk to the coaches, the directors, the physicians, and then they would decide. Well, of course, if you go forward a few years later, all of that disappeared, right? It's up to the student to decide if they want to participate in sports. And this is also interesting. So it's called the Gender Inclusivity Toolkit. It was adopted in 2020 by CIF. It's an exact copy. I don't know, people might be just listening, but it's an exact copy.
I'm going to look that up right now.
Yeah. So this is the Washington Interscholastic Association. You can see the trans flag on the top, and it says gender diversity. So this is like, one of those kind of cult trans groups, lobbying groups that works in a community to transition kids. So California copied Washington's, verbatim. And so then the person who actually wrote the toolkit is Aidan Key. And, this person is actually a woman who identifies as a trans man. So it's you can't make this up. The policy is actually written by a woman pretending to be a man. You can see her. I post sometimes her pictures when she was growing up. She has a twin sister. And anyways, but yeah, so CIF has quietly introduced all these different ways that we allow male participation in girls sports. Yeah, thank you. That's great. I just made that last week.
Yeah.
I just wanted people to understand. Yeah, thank you. So CIF is divided by 10 sections across, we have a huge state. That section that A.B. Hernandez is in, it's called the Southern section. It's a number 9 on there. That's all of Los Angeles. So there's 850,000 high school kids competing in high school sports. About 400,000 are girls. I think that section is probably 100,000 students, right? So we're talking about huge numbers of kids are being, brainwashed by the sports federation here in our state. And, I started posting stuff on Instagram about A.B. Hernandez, and I hadn't used Instagram much. Once I did that, I started hearing from other parents around the state and other coaches. And that's how I actually heard about this one athlete, Cole Marino, who's competing down in San Diego, where I also competed in track and field for CIF back in the 80s, and then got to compete at Cal Poly as a college track runner. So, and then there's the other boy in the Central Coast in Santa Maria. His name is Antonio Alice Beretta. So yeah, there was these three athletes actually made it to the section finals. So we don't know how many other athletes are, just competing in the league championships or like at, my high school, because, I submitted a public records request. CIF says they can't track any numbers because the coaches don't have to disclose if there's transgender athletes on their team. So there's no way to track it. We don't know if it's 20 kids, if it's 200, if it's 2,000, if it's 20,000, and a lot of these boys are actually being transitioned before puberty, so it's a little harder to tell, right? I mean, there's ways you can tell, but it's scary. It's really.
That's why they advocate for this earlier transition so that they can pass. But what's so scary about that is that these little kids are being put on a path where the effects are irreversible. They cannot be unchanged. They are now stuck. And they're making decisions, at 6 years old now, 6, 7, 8 years old, to change their sex, which you cannot do.
Right.
But I mean, to chemicalize and to think that you can just stop puberty and that there'd be no consequences by using drugs that were meant to castrate sex offenders. giving them to kids in a way that's
Right.
not even approved by the FDA and saying that this is all,
Exactly.
oh, it's just harmless. It's not going to do any harm. But it does. Even the social transitioning without
Mhm.
any medication usually puts these kids on the fast track to a medical transition eventually.
Mhm.
So yeah, but I'll remove this. I did find also, I want to bring onto stage, remove this, but I also thought interesting what you said that girls, when they are struggling mentally with their body and for lots of different reasons, whether it's influence of social media, what's happening in a classroom, abuse, they have some challenges that when they get to high school and they think, well, I'm great at sports, but I'm identifying as a male, so I would have to join the male team. They see that there's not I don't have a chance. So they
Mhm.
just drop out of their sport, which is
They
really sad.
do.
That's sad that now they're not participating. But boys, they look and they think,
Mhm.
ah, like I'd win it all.
Yeah,
I'll do great.
exactly.
So it makes perfect sense that this is a
Mhm.
phenomenon that we see where males who are um, caught up in this whole, transgender phenomenon, that they'll join the team if
Right.
they played sports at all because they'll go from last to first.
Right.
And then they'll be celebrated by the community. Oh, isn't it wonderful? Isn't it wonderful? Until recently celebrated by the community. So that's actually makes a lot of sense to me now. I want to add. So you talked about this. Let's look
Mhm.
this
That's it.
gender diverse youth sport inclusivity toolkit.
It is. It is the most insane piece of propaganda I've ever read in my life. And it's on every single high school's website in California. I think we have like 8,000 high schools. All you have to do is go onto the high school, go onto their athletics page, and then look up, like it'll say like coach resources or parent resources or inclusion. And this document, I guess is required to be up there, but it starts with these crazy definitions, right? We're going to have this new language where we have cisgender and transgender and gender identities. And then it starts there by saying, how does California law protect kids? Well, it doesn't mention that federal law says that
No.
girls and women should have protected sports. So of course, federal law supersedes state law, but it doesn't mention that. Yeah, and it says assigned sex. The person
Yeah.
was given that describes the sex a person was given at birth based on their anatomy. That none of that is true. Sex is determined at the moment of conception. I knew my daughter was going to be a girl because I had an amniocentesis done at 20 weeks pregnant. There is no doctor who is assigning the sex. They observe it, but it's based off of that moment of conception.
Yes, look at this, a win-win
Yes.
situation for everyone. How ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous.
Right.
Pure propaganda, and you're right. They
And that's a
don't
woman. Sorry.
oh my gosh.
Aiden Key is a woman. I think her name was Susan growing up. Oh wait, and I think it was Bonnie. I'm thinking of Buck Angels, but yeah, this is a woman, who works in the state of Washington and makes a lot of money with the gender diversity. It's a trans nonprofit or NGO.
Yes, that makes sense. But notice, like you said, they're not mentioning current federal law. They're not
Right.
mentioning the guidance that has been given by the Department of Education, the Department of Justice, the Office of Civil Rights. It's not
Mhm.
mentioning the president's executive orders signed. They're still basing on California law, and there are two very big cases that will be decided by the Supreme Court that have a direct bearing on this toolkit. And while I'm hoping, and everyone is telling us, Alliance Defending Freedom is involved in one of these cases, that they're anticipating a good outcome. what do you think the chances are that even if the Supreme Court does say that states can define sex as male female, and states can exclude males from all female categories? If they say can and not must, what is the state of California going to do?
Yeah, I'm hoping that because our public schools do get federal funding, I think it's like, I don't know, 8% on average. If they're not willing to do it because it's the right thing to do, right? And 26 states in the US are doing it. They'll do it because Trump's administration will say, well, we don't need to give you this federal funding then, because you're actually, you're violating Title IX. That's what I'm hoping. It's so crazy. These lawsuits take so long. And I just want to point out too that, they call it the CIF Gender Diverse Toolkit because by not calling it a policy, they didn't have to bring it to a public meeting. And I attend a lot of these meetings, right? We have the Brown Act, which requires that they notify the public gets a chance to comment, that we get to watch, the entire meeting as rules are being changed or policies. But they call it a toolkit so they can just kind of do it all, backdoor. Nobody knows what's happening, who's funding it, what the ramifications are. And same with their policy program, like this recent idea of giving out dual medals and allowing the displaced girl to go on and compete at the next level. CIF has not ever brought that to a public meeting. And, any other change like that would have come to a public meeting, right? So this perfect photograph where it shows, I think that was that long jump? Or no, probably triple. Yeah, maybe triple jump. He won the triple jump and he won the high jump. He had the highest jump and the longest jump in the triple jump, and they got third in long jump. And so, yeah, they did this thing where they gave out a second medal, a special one, to A.B. Hernandez.
So co-champion. When did this, because this is new for this year. We didn't see this last year. So this is a result of the public outcry. Do you think that the attention, the public outcry that and President Trump administration and the pressure, I know the Department of Justice, the Office of Civil Rights, has launched several investigations into California, and they're currently under investigation for violation of Title IX policies. But in response, this is what they're doing. They're still allowing AB and other males to compete, and now, it's like co-champions. And
it's so destabilizing, or so I don't know, the emperor has no clothes, right? Like this poor girl, she gets her 15 minutes of fame. This is her one chance to be the state champion and to have all eyes on her. And she's worked so hard, right? Since probably she was, 3 years old to become a fantastic athlete and dedicated so many hours. And, I was at the state meet on Saturday, and I watched A.B. Hernandez. He had to, he's of course the only athlete who's competing in both triple jump and high jump, as well as long jump, because you could never have an athlete become so specialized at that high of a level that they could do these very different kind of jumps, right? The high jump and the triple jump. But he's the one athlete that can do it. And he's running back and forth across the field, like, hurtling over the ribbons to get between the two events, because he's competing in multiple events. It's like a 3-ring circus where he's like the main show, and all these professional photographers are filming him and watching it all happen. And, he high jumped 5'10". The lowest jump in the boys category at the state championship is 6'4". So he was still a half foot away from the last place high jumper in the boys. So, he's a decent athlete, mediocre, right? He's probably somewhere, on the lower end of an average varsity team. He's nowhere near a male athlete at the state level. In all 3 events, he would have finished last place, but he won the girls division. So, and 2 of them, and third in the other. And
That's a good
I
point that he can compete in so many. My daughters have competed in track, and you're limited to the events because you just risk of injury, and you
right.
just can't physically do that. You can't you have to eventually, maybe you can do the relay and an 800,
Yes,
or if you're going to
right.
do, like I was just talking to Ella, who does the triple jump, but she couldn't do three different jumps. Like that would be way beyond her capacity. But for
Right.
a male could do that when competing against other females, and
Yes.
that's not fair.
Yeah, it's really everyone knows it's not fair. Thank God there were a bunch of men who are wearing their Save Women's Sports t-shirts. We're not allowed to like boo or say that's wrong or even really talk amongst ourselves, but we are allowed to wear, our t-shirts in. So yeah, and they put the free speech area nowhere near the entrance or where people were gathered. It was like, I think Sonia Shaw put a photo up. It was like a half mile away on the other side of the high school. They just don't want people to even be able to talk about it.
What is the free speech area?
So yeah, so CIF, I was at the section championship last week at the same high school, and I brought in my signs. This is what they look like, right? Little signs that just say, "Hey CIF, girls sports are for girls," or I think the other one says, "This is discrimination." Title IX is protect girls, and I was allowed to bring my signs in. And there were, I think some mothers had their signs saying, kind of cheering on their daughters in the 800. I noticed. So there were signs allowed. But at the state meet a week later, big sign saying no banners, no flyers, no signs. And so, this is the other sign I sometimes carry around when I go to school board meetings, just because it shows just how unfair it is, to these girls, that who might be looking to sports as a way to get the attention of recruiters to go onto college level. And then they get put next to a boy, or they don't even, until this season, they don't even get a chance to show up to the state meter. We have these really big invitationals in California, Arcadia, Mount Sac Invitational. And these girls aren't getting to even compete at that level. Yeah, that is a great photo. I mean, he's showing off, I call it stolen valor. His Letterman jacket shows he has won the league championship every year. Oh, there it is. There it is. The state championship, the finals. And it is multiple sports, including girls volleyball, which, his teammates have, they have a lawsuit against the school district and CIF because it was, unsafe to have a boy on their team and in their locker room. So
you're right.
Yeah.
This is haunting. This makes me so, when I saw this photo, all the patches just hanging, all the awards,
Right.
it's to me, it just makes me angry. It makes my blood boil.
Hey, just think about that girl who, that's her one chance to be the league championship, the league champion, and to get that patch for her Letterman jacket. And then it goes to a boy, and you can just look at his body frame. He's 5'10", which, some of those girls are taller, but his body composition, his body fat, I'm guessing, is about 8 or 10%, maybe 7% body fat. Girls can't get below 14% without, having like stress fractures and, you won't menstruate. Females have more body fat. So he's got this huge advantage because he can be this lean. And then you look at, the way his knees and his hips, that ratio is so different for a male athlete, which gives you so many advantages. Yeah, and his broader shoulders, that picture just, tells 1,000 words, right? It's also crazy.
Picture, a lot of the images just, they say a
Right.
lot. Again, the shared podium, the girls that, what I liked, there's a video, we'll go back to this one, where her name, Malia, after everyone stepped down, she jumped back on the number one spot, stood there, and everyone cheered, "Go, Malia." And, so I like that little act of rebellion, like just getting up there and like, I'm really number one.
Yeah.
So
We should point out too, right? The reason why she has wider hips is because, we actually in some ways have the superior physical body because we can grow babies inside us, right? We have more flexibility and we have wider hips and our bodies are shaped differently. When girls tend to get breasts as they get older. which, it hurts in sports, but it's great for creating life. And so, we need to let our girls know that, it's like
Yes.
your body
And
is
that
just amazing.
and that's why the Title IX was created to bring fairness to sports because
Right.
females, I mean, and you were an athlete,
Mhm.
that females did not have equal funding, equal opportunity. And if they wanted to play a sport, there wasn't a girls team or a
Mhm.
women's team, so they would have to play on a male team, and they couldn't compete because of inherent biological differences. But in order to change that, in order for fairness, so that girls could compete in sports, because girls love sports too, and they want to compete. They don't play them just for fun. They play them because they
Right.
want to win.
Yes.
This isn't just a social hour. This isn't a
Mhm.
learning time. This is about playing to win and be superior and to get scholarships, collegiate scholarships, and win awards, all of the things. So Title IX was created in order to bring fairness in funding
Mhm.
and equal opportunity to women and girls. And the fact that it's being twisted now by so-called feminists to include men who identify or feel like a woman, just it basically then Title IX doesn't exist anymore. If it's not a binary, there's no reason for it.
Yeah, it's yeah, I'm still so disappointed in all my feminist friends that I had in the past. I don't have them anymore because they can't understand how wrong it is to let a male who wants to be called a woman, um, or in the case of these kids, they're calling themselves non-binary or gender fluid or gender queer or bigender. The kids learn 13 gender identities in California schools, and they can, to tell girls or women they don't get to have their own spaces, their own bathrooms or locker rooms or shelters or, their own prisons. That's just the most crazy thing that women aren't fighting for right now. So,
Yeah, it is. It is. It's a crazy thing that women are fighting for. Why do you
yeah.
you're in California, and
Mhm.
my friend Kelly, there's Sonia. Why is it that you think that there aren't more progressive women fighting, or maybe it might be secret supporters,
Right.
but why is
You know,
it there's not
yeah.
more fighting
You know,
for women and girls?
I'd say there's three main ways they come after you, right? The first thing they're going to do is they're going to come after your job. So if you have any kind of job where you might want to get a promotion, a raise, become maybe, a professor or become the school principal or, any kind of job advancement, say goodbye to that. They'll come after your livelihood if you own your own business. They'll take away any chance of you to make money. They'll go on Nextdoor or Facebook or, all these different places. They can say, don't support this bigot, transphobic person. So they come after your job, your livelihood, and then they'll come after your kind of social network. They'll come after your friends in your neighborhood, friends. If you're in a parent group, you'll get kicked out of parent groups. And then the next thing is they try to break down your family, and they'll contact, maybe your adult kids, or they'll contact grandkids or the ex-wives, and they'll say, hey, this person is hateful, bigoted, transphobic. And then they'll try to get these ties to be broken between child and parent. This is kind of public knowledge that my daughter and I are estranged. I don't want to cry, but it's one of the, and, she has lots of wonderful friends that are still in this LGBTQ community. So I'm seen as somebody who trying to hurt those kids when I'm actually trying to help those kids, right? They're amazing, wonderful kids. But yeah, it breaks up families. And so most people can't risk that. They can't risk losing their family, their livelihood, they're being socially ostracized. And then, in like my case, I've spent, I don't know, 50,000 on attorneys, right? I have to have attorneys to represent me in custody cases and, and cases with the medical part of this, and cases with my former employer. You know, so that it gets it takes a special kind of situation where you're willing to risk it all. But in my case, I watched my daughter's friends having top surgery while they were still, you know, junior high school and high school, and I just can't believe that can be happening in a small town without people saying something's wrong.
So then in areas where there isn't this cost in more conservative areas, where the majority of folks, and I know a lot of them, even in Wisconsin and everywhere, they need to stand up, because if there just needs to be parents standing up, pointing out the truth. I think, though, sometimes we are seeing it more, but we didn't see it before because they didn't think it could happen. And while they were supportive and like, oh my gosh, that's terrible, I disagree with that, they'll tune into the podcast about it, but they didn't really talk about it out loud because that's not going to happen. Like that's not going to happen in my community until it does. Like you said, until the first like radically woke counselor comes to your school district, or there's a teacher that's holding secret GSA meetings, and the ACLU comes in to represent a family where there's a even girl identifying as a boy and wanting to use the male bathrooms. That young kids, and that's something that's happened in many states like Wisconsin. So it will eventually reach you. These things do. I mean, look at that toolkit that you showed me. The date on that's 2013. Just because it's not happening now doesn't mean it's not going to happen in the future. And it might even be happening now and you just don't know it, because kids are notorious for kind of keeping things quiet from their parents. They just don't want a big deal. So what is your advice to families that they are in more conservative areas and there isn't a big political cost for them to stand up and to go on social media, to say something, to go to school board meetings, to vote for candidates that will say, we will not allow gender ideology in this school? What's your advice to them?
You know, I should mention there's two examples that just come to mind of just incredible people in the state of California. Right here in, I think it's Placer County, we have a physician who works for UC Davis. His name is Arthur De Lamour. I think it's Lomier. Anyways, Arthur's the first name. He's a pediatrician, gastroenterologist, clinical professor. And he speaks out on this issue because, he's a former Army physician. So he's retired from the Army, but works for the university. He's tenured. He's a Catholic. And he's willing to speak at the state legislature. And, he's got medical students who are, he teaches, they're his students, and they've asked him to please don't retire. You're just amazing because you speak out on this issue of the gender, the medical scandal behind all of this. And he was at a recent legislative hearing where he talked about how dangerous it is to have kids socially transitioned at school. That's the first step to being medicalized. So, he's tenured professor. He's close to retirement. He's a fantastic father and man to be speaking on this issue. And he's a physician. So, and then the other person is someone like, Sonia Shaw, of course, school board president, who's running for the state of California Department of Education superintendent. So please vote for Sonia or any of the, or Steve Hilton. He's also running for governor. And then I was going to mention Jessica Tapia, who is a school teacher who she actually got fired, I think, for speaking out on this down in Southern California. And she won a $300,000 lawsuit because, they were violating, I think it was her religious freedom, right? To speak against what she saw as lying to children. So, the more teachers we get who will speak out, and I know some wonderful teachers up and down the Central Valley. And then there's also teachers here in Davis that, whisper to me, they know this is wrong, but there's lots of conservative areas of California where you do see teachers and coaches and leaders just sort of speaking out on this.
Well, there was just a big case, Mirabelli, and that's
Right.
that setting. Yes, could you talk a little bit about that? I mean, that is positive news from
It is.
It's happened in California, but it's the effects. This decision has repercussions throughout all of America.
Right. And, I'm not an expert on that. I think it's down in Escondido, which is really close to where, I'm from, that San Diego area. And yeah, it's 2 teachers, right? I should know this. I had it printed out a while ago, but my mind is so filled with sports right now and the medical side of this.
Because and I've talked about
Yeah.
it too but the Mirabelli case, it was with teachers and had to do with compelled speech, but it was keeping secrets from parents.
Yeah, exactly.
And that the state of California was told. I mean, first of all, we have just from June, the Mahmoud v. Taylor, which made it clear that schools cannot keep secrets from parents. That's something that should not have had to be restated by the U.S. Supreme Court, but was, especially when it comes to a family's deeply held religious beliefs, that parents have the right to opt their kids out of controversial curriculum, and that they need to be that curriculum needs to be presented to them, and they need to have that opportunity to opt out. And in the case of Mahmoud in Montgomery County, Maryland, they not only were not providing parents an opt-out, they were telling parents there was no choice. Your kid was compelled to learn about gender identity and gender ideology and comprehensive sexuality education. And the Supreme Court stepped in and said, absolutely not. That parents, they reasserted the fundamental right of parents to direct the care and upbringing of their children. And we're celebrating this June 1st. I should mention that we're celebrating June as Parental Rights Month in Moms for Liberty, and celebrating Pierce versus the Society of Sisters. But so Mahmoud was already in place, but California, in defiance of that, said, no, we are sticking with our policies, which allow teachers and actually compel them to keep these secrets from parents. And 2 teachers got involved. And I don't want to get too far in the details without my notes, but the Supreme Court said that sided with reality and with parental rights, and said that the state of California does not have the ability to compel these teachers to keep secrets from parents. So that's a big one, though. This is still a case. This case is still in process. I know that's when I was discussing it with lawyers who know more about this than we do. They took the good from that, the signal from the Supreme Court that they were still reaffirming and standing with parents and reaffirming parental rights, but this is still an ongoing case. So it's a lot of this stuff. So in California, I know that it's a state that doesn't have a lot of respect for parental rights, and often will keep secrets from parents. Is that something that is still the case?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's, the teachers are pretty clear at the public schools that they think their role is to keep a child safe. And the way gender identity ideology has been taught to them is that a child knows themselves best, and that the trusted adult, this is part of the curriculum, the trusted adult could be any adult in their life who takes an interest in them and supports them in their authentic self, basically. So they teach kids that the trusted adult could be a coach, a school counselor, the principal, a paraeducator, it could be just about anybody in their life. And so the teachers really like this idea that, oh, well, if the child says, it could be a 2nd grader, 3rd grader, my mom doesn't let me wear dresses at home, or, when I come to school, and it's a boy, the teacher will be like, well, I can, I want to support you here at the school. And then the teachers feel good about themselves, right? They're doing something that they see as, making a difference in a child's life, and then the child feels happy and excited and they get celebrated at school. They become the special trans kid in the classroom. So yeah, I think it really does come from a teachers union or
Yeah.
the kind of the way it's brought into the and again, most teachers, probably 95% in Davis, are women. They get together in their staff room and they socialize together. And so it's really important to have that group think and all kind of, share the same belief or way of teaching. And so you just have it in the classroom where teachers think it's perfectly okay not to include parents, to have special names or pronouns in the classroom.
Yes, separate
yeah.
medical records, not following
Yeah.
FERPA. And I'm going to read, just so that clarification in my notes about Mirabelli, that the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that in the case Mirabelli versus Bonta, this case challenged California's policies that allowed schools to facilitate gender transitions for students while keeping parents in the dark. In the ruling, the court said, and I quote, that the state's policies cut out the primary protectors of children's best interests, their parents. So that is a very positive direction. But as you see, so you have several big elections that will be very important for California, and one in which Moms for Liberties we have endorsed Sonia Shaw in a statewide race. This is the first time we've endorsed in a statewide race, but she is running for the state superintendent of public education. So we wish her all, like, I know right now there's voting going on right now. So, and she definitely, as a school board president in Chino Valley, correct? She is standing firm on all of the issues that we care about, fighting for parental rights, fighting for biological reality. And she and Sophia just recently held a press conference about what's happening in California as far as sports. So where does everything stand right now with AB Hernandez? What just happened over the weekend and what's going on in the future?
So AB Hernandez is actually, this is the third year he made it to the state championship. In 2024, it wasn't known that he was trans, right? I'm sure a lot of people knew, but at the state meet, he ended up just getting the first place, the girls medal. So the other athlete got nothing. Then last year was the first pilot year. And then this year, again, the same thing. But this year he competed in 3 events and won the long jump. Sorry, he won the triple jump, high jump, and then got third in the long jump. It says on his social media, or his mother's, and some of the groups down there that, the trans pride groups, that he's not planning to compete at the college level because they don't accept transgender athletes. And that's not true because, I've been following the junior college, community college level sports here in California. They are 100% into the idea that, male athletes can compete in the women's category. So I was attending the Santa Rosa volleyball games where there's a 200-pound man competing. His last name, I think, is Gomez, competing in the women's category. And there's a lawsuit there as well where the teammates are suing the state of California community college system and the Santa Rosa College for violating their Title IX rights and having a male, in their locker room in their sports. I think one of the girls actually got a concussion in a practice where he smashed the ball at her. So AB Hernandez plays volleyball. He's also a hitter. He plays that role at the line or at the net. He may end up competing next year in women's volleyball or track and field at the junior college level. I don't know for certain what his plans are.
Yeah. But for now, right now, walking away with a lot of championships, and this weekend, are there going to be more events, or is there going to
This
be
was the end. So the state
This was the
championship.
end.
So yeah, there was a section finals, and then a week later was masters. You know, and it's brought together several different divisions within the section. And then this last one was a state championship. So that's there's no national championship at the high school level, but you can see where he would have placed in the nation. It's probably in the top 2 or 3. I haven't looked this week to see, but yeah, you know, we sing it across the U.S. I think there's at
Yes,
least
you can
5.
see right here we have,
5
and
states, yeah.
this is a sophomore, and the subject of one of the SCOTUS cases that will be decided, Becky Pepper Jackson. This is West Virginia, so this is a red state. This is a red state, but this boy just won the girls' state championship in shot put as a sophomore, and the ACLU. I listened. I was there in DC during oral arguments. The ACLU was swearing up and down that BPJ was just a mediocre athlete, no difference. You know, actually doesn't do as well as the girls on the team. Is actually middle of the pack. You know, they made a lot of arguments like that. And look, as a sophomore, he just beat out all the girls in the state.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you know, high school shot put, I think it's several pounds different and different size, right? Because boys have bigger hands, and I think their upper body strength is like 40% greater than girls, especially in this kind of motion, right? That punching or that pushing motion. And of course, he can also spin around faster as he's, you know, getting ready to throw. There's so many advantages you have as a male shot putter. So.
And if anyone wants to know more about this, follow Kristen Wagner and Alliance Defending Freedom, who made those arguments before SCOTUS, and and follow them and the good work that they're doing. Then I think I have, again, BPJ smokes the competition, West Virginia State track meet, and told the things that will never happen. Again, this will never happen. They just want to have fun. They just want to play. Sport is all about inclusion. Again, and I think that's how to say that it's not about winning, that it's not about competing is wrong, but to say that girls must be compassionate to these boys. What about them? What about their rights? What about what they have earned? And why should girls sacrifice truth in order to make someone feel good? I think all the messages that are being sent are so backwards.
I'm also so tired too, I'm sorry, of people saying, why don't the girls just boycott or forfeit or, you know, not show up to the track? I mean, this is like their one chance, you know, to compete in sports. And, you know, think about the pressure you felt as a teenager. And they didn't make this problem, right? It's the adults. And why not just ask all of the officials at the track meet not to show up? Like, you know, we saw that in Maine where a pole vault official said, I'm not going to, you know, do the state meet if you're going to allow a boy in the girls category. And he said, I'm just not going to be an official. If all the officials did that, they couldn't hold the track meet, right? Or if all the coaches said, hey, we're going to show up to CIF and say, no, we want to protect our girl athletes. You know, we want to defend them. There's no reason the adults aren't speaking up. There's no reason we don't have coaches, you know, officials just lining up saying enough. But yeah, I just, to ask girls to do this, you know, we had I think 9 teams in California forfeit this fall rather than play against A.B. Hernandez in volleyball. But that's a lot easier when it's, you know, a league game and it's your whole entire team. And, you know, they could say, the parents would say it's because of a safety issue, which it is. That's a little easier to forfeit. But
you're right. And I agree with Sage Steele with what she said, that often, why are the girls even competing? Why are they? Well, you know, why? Let's stop asking all the kids to do the heavy lifting.
Exactly.
To do that, the adults need to be a part of that. One thing that I like that the girls do, like what Malia did, do a little, if you can do some small act of rebellion, or Alexa Anderson, when they respectfully didn't go up on the podium and they stood, they stood off to the side. There's a way that you can try to show, or you can, like our friend Jennifer say, wear some XXXY gear, wear a hat, wear something that shows like a wink, like I don't
Yes.
agree with this. Like this
Right.
isn't. But in talking to my friend 7-year-old Ella Fry, when I asked her why aren't more girls speaking out, she said, she's got her parents' support and she is just an unusually amazing, strong girl. But some of her friends they are depending on athletic scholarships to go to the college of their dreams. And the parents and the girls are very afraid to speak out because they think they could lose their scholarship. And considering the way that Ella is being treated and the way these girls like Riley Gaines, Alexa Anderson, Sophia, all the girls that stand up, the way they are treated by some very small group, but a group of staff members or bullies, it's understandable that they are worried that this could have a detrimental effect on their future. So even very supportive parents and kids kind of shy away from being too public because until there is more buy-in by, I think, even professional female athletes have nothing, they really don't have anything to lose because they've made their money, they've done well in their sport. We need just more people to stand up to make it safe for everyone to do so. It's such a small number that can make that change. And I'm happy to see what a lot of these girls are doing all on their own. The press conferences they're holding,
Yep.
the walkouts they are staging. It's amazing that the kids and the girls are finally saying enough. If the adults won't protect us, then we're going to protect ourselves. I think it's very brave of them, but I think that a lot of adults should really really think about it's their time to protect the girls. Kids shouldn't have to be doing this on their own. That's what I'm
Agree
grateful for.
100%.
Well, thank you for coming on. And tell everyone, what is your X handle? How can people follow you, support you? You have a lot of, do you have a website? How can people support you and what you're doing?
I actually now on, Facebook I use a lot too. It's Beth Young Born, and I set everything to public, and it's a really good way to share just a lot of information. I think on X I'm at born_Beth 2345. But sometimes you just put my name in there.
Yeah, I'm going to put it out there.
There's a lot of viral videos of things I've done. And then the other one is on Instagram. I think I'm Beth Born in Davis, California. Maybe there's an underscore there. But
now.
I tell people, I'm pretty fortunate. I just like, people just to kind of share what's happening in their lives over this issue and just supporting me online. The places where people can really support, if you have the means, would be a group like ICONS, Independent Council for Women's Sports. They help out these athletes in the lawsuits that are being filed against the state of California and in other states. So ICONS is a wonderful group. And Moms for Liberty, has made a huge difference in my life because they're just, almost every state, chapters and counties across California. I think there's 14 chapters in our state. And it's just a great way to connect with other, like-minded parents or, you don't have to be a parent, women who want to kind of fight to protect our kids and our daughters. So, yeah.
Yes, you can follow us and you can go for more information, momsforliberty.org. But I want to just put this stuff again to follow Beth. And I'll put in the comments links to, there's a lot of great organizations, Alliance Defending Freedom in Wisconsin, We have the Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty. We have Southeastern Legal Foundation. We have the America First Legal. We have Icons. We have, He Cheated. There's it has the stats. Like, so if anyone ever says, like, you got to go to, and I'm going to put this all in the comments, places to go if you need just some quick stats to combat, oh, this never happens, or why do you care about something that happens so little? Well, first of all, it's about truth, and
Right.
this is a corrupting influence on all of our institutions. But when you don't know what a woman is, you should not be in charge of educating America's youth. And I think it's just had just a huge impact on culture, on education. Look at our proficiency numbers. I mean, since the radicals have taken over so many of our cherished institutions, those institutions have started to fail kids and families and America. So we need to take them back and get back to what's right and what's decent and fairness and all of the things. So that's my TED Talk for today. But
That's great.
what are your final words to everyone who's listening?
I think my final words are: don't be afraid to just use your voice and just say it like you see it. You know, we don't have to use their language. We don't have to pretend to go along with something. You know, a boy should grow up to be a man and a girl should grow up to be a woman. And yeah, girls should have their own sport. So just practice, you know, like it's really scary if you don't like public speaking to go to your school board meeting. But it gets easier with time, and you don't have to be perfect. Just take the opportunity to speak whenever you get the chance. So
yes, don't let perfect be the enemy of good.
Yes, exactly.
Don't wait till it's so ready. I mean, my first school board speech, I think I threw up in the bathroom the first like,
Exactly.
I've never done this before. It's a scary thing to stand up in front of people who you will see at the grocery store, that you will see in the carpool line. I think it's easier to stand up before a group of strangers and give your opinion than a group of your community, people who you know, that your kids have play dates with. And then you're worried about, how is this going to affect my kid in the school? Well, I'm here to tell you that you will survive, because you can't get more outspoken than me and Beth, and we're still standing. Like,
Exactly.
you will survive it. And not only that, it gives you a superpower, because when we all care what people think. So I never say I don't care. I do. When I say I don't care what people think, it means I care about something else way more than the opinion of someone I don't even really know. Or even if I do know them, I care about truth. I care about kids. I care about girls. I care about America, care about our culture and our civilization more than rando guy that doesn't have his real name in his handle on X that's making fun of me. Like, we've got to not care about what people think, especially people who hate us. We need to care more about our families, the future, and our daughters in this situation. We have to show them that we will stand up and fight for them. They have to see that in us so that they can be strong and fight for themselves.
Exactly.
And you've done a lot for that. So I thank you. And I really hope that in time, the relationship between you and your daughter is restored. I'll
Thank
pray
you.
for you. And I thank you so much for what you do. You are at these meets. A lot of the video that is on Outkick that we see a Fox,
Yeah.
that's video you've taken. So I thank you very much. I want to spotlight and have everyone know, and I'll put up that here's Beth. She's the mom that is going to these events and taking these videos, and you get a lot of heat for it. They're not very nice to you, are they?
No, but that's okay. They'll call us names, or do all kinds of crazy things to try to get us to be quiet. But I like to think, we're like Teflon on us, right? It'll just slide right off. So go ahead and say whatever you want to us.
Yeah, say whatever you want. It doesn't matter when you because you care about something else
Right.
more. Something else matters more
Mhm.
than that. And when they are smearing you, you are over the target because they only smear who they fear. If
Right.
you're not, I think, is it Harmeet said this, Harmeet Dillon, who is the head of the Office of Civil Rights.
Mhm.
She said about SPLF, the Southern Poverty Law Center, if you're not on their hate map and you call yourself a culture warrior, you should be really considering how effective you are. And I'm like, yes,
Yeah. Yeah.
no one wants to be on a hate map, but
Right.
in this case, if you aren't on their radar and you call yourself a culture warrior, then you're not very effective.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
you're very effective. I'm very
Yeah.
effective. Moms for Liberty is effective. So
Yeah.
thank you so much for all that you do. Everyone follow Beth and stay tuned. And I know that you will be in the fight for California, and we're all praying for sanity in California. It's too beautiful of a state to
Right.
just let go. It is gorgeous. And it's looking forward to being there. I actually will be in San Diego on Wednesday. So thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks. Bye, everybody.